In the vast archives of American naval history, a few names echo louder than others. Among them is a single word, short, sharp, and carried through generations of sailors with equal parts pride and reverence. Hornet. For over 2 centuries, ships bearing that name have sailed into storms, battles, and the unknown. But none would embody the legend quite like the one launched in 1943. U.S.S. Hornet, CV-12. This is the story of a ship born from loss, forged in the fires of World War II, resurrected again as a Cold War symbol of American technological triumph, and ultimately retired into peaceful memory as a museum resting on the quiet shores of Alameda, California. Today we travel across nearly 3 decades of history, not just the history of a warship, but of the world around it. A story that begins with tragedy, grows through sacrifice, witnesses the birth of space exploration, and ends with the echoes of footsteps on her steel decks, long after the engines fell silent. Long before the hull of CV-12 touched water, the name Hornet was already legendary. The first American Hornet fought in the Revolutionary War. Another Hornet defeated British ships during the War of 1812. More would follow, ships that carried the name into battles across oceans and across centuries. But the direct predecessor of CV-12 was the U.S.S. Hornet, CV-8, the ship that launched the Doolittle raid, the first American airstrike on Japan after Pearl Harbor. Her crew had achieved what many considered impossible. They had taken B-25 bombers, land-based aircraft not designed to fly from carriers, and launched them from the deck into harsh winds and uncertain futures. That mission galvanized American morale. It told the world that Japan, despite its early victories, was not invulnerable. But only months later, fate caught up with the ship. During the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, the Hornet, CV-8, was struck by bombs, torpedoes, and crashing enemy aircraft. She fought until she could fight no more. By the end of the day, the proud ship slipped beneath the waves. Many sailors survived, but the loss was devastating, and so the U.S. Navy made a decision. A symbolic decision. The next fleet carrier nearing completion, yet unnamed, would inherit the legacy. A phoenix rising from the ashes of the Pacific. She would be called U.S.S. Hornet CV-12. Construction of CV-12 had already begun in Newport News, Virginia, but after the sinking of her predecessor, the project took on new urgency. On August 30th, 1943, the ship was launched. Her steel hull touched water for the first time, and with it, the rebirth of a legend. She was a modern marvel of her time. Over 27,000 tons, nearly 900 feet long, capable of carrying more than 100 aircraft, manned by nearly 3,500 sailors and aviators. Yet what made her extraordinary wasn't just her size. It was the moment in history into which she was born. By late 1943, the Pacific War was shifting. The United States, once battered and on the defensive, was now moving steadily across island chains, Tarawa, the Gilberts, the Marshalls, closing in on Japan's inner defenses. The Hornet would join that push. After trials, training, and preparations, she sailed towards the Pacific, toward a world of heat, danger, and violent uncertainty, and towards the greatest naval war in human history. By early 1944, the Pacific Ocean had become a vast, deadly chessboard. Aircraft carriers were now the queens, mobile fortresses that could strike across hundreds of miles. The Hornet joined the Fast Carrier Task Force, the most powerful naval striking force ever assembled. Her early missions set the tone for what would become a relentless pace. The Hornet launched aircraft deep into enemy territory, softening Japanese defenses and supporting amphibious landings. The skies above the Pacific were hostile territory, filled with anti-aircraft fire, storms, and the deadly threat of Japanese Zero fighters. Yet, day after day, American air crews pressed on. In February 1944, the Hornet's aircraft took part in the first carrier-based strikes on the Japanese homeland since the Doolittle raid. For the Japanese, it was a shocking reminder that the war was turning. For the Hornet, it was a symbolic continuation of the legacy of CV-8. By summer, the Hornet was part of the massive operation to seize the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. It was here, during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, that American carrier pilots decimated Japanese air power in what would become known as the Marianas Turkey Shoot. Hornet aviators played a vital role, shooting down enemy aircraft, striking warships, and clearing the skies for American forces. The battle marked a turning point. Japan's skilled pilots were nearly wiped out. The Hornet, meanwhile, fought on with relentless efficiency. In the uncertainty of the Pacific War, life aboard the U.S.S. Hornet often felt suspended between calm seas and sudden chaos. The low, constant vibration of the engines never disappeared. It echoed through every corridor like the heartbeat of the ship itself. Sailors woke each day knowing it might be ordinary, or the most dangerous day of their lives. The Hornet wasn't just a vessel of steel and machinery. It was a floating world of hopes, fears, and silent promises shared among those who served on her deck. When the flight crew prepared for launch, a tense stillness settled over the ship. Every man understood how fragile survival could be. A single mechanical failure or a sudden attack could end a mission instantly. Yet the pilots stepped forward without hesitation, climbing into their planes as if boarding destiny. Their mission was not symbolic, it was essential. Hornet carried the responsibility of pushing back the shadows spreading across the Pacific, one sortie at a time. During the rare, quiet moments between operations, sailors would gather along the railing to watch the endless horizon. The vastness of the ocean reminded them of home, of letters tucked into their uniforms, written for mothers, wives, and sweethearts. Many kept those letters folded carefully, worn at the edges from being read over and over again. The Hornet's steel bulkheads absorbed everything, their worries, their longing, their determination. But the true heartbeat of the USS Hornet came from the unspoken brotherhood forged in danger. When the alarm sounded, no one thought of himself first. Every man moved instinctively to protect the others. Loss was a constant companion. When an aircraft failed to return, the silence that followed was heavier than any storm. The crew mourned not with loud displays, but in small gestures. A lowered gaze, a quiet pause, a name remembered. As the war drew to a close, the Hornet stood as more than a decorated warship. She had become a living witness to history. Battle scars lined her metal body, marks left by storms, explosions, and time. Yet she endured. She returned home, carrying with her the spirits of those who served, those who survived, and those who never left. Today, as a museum ship, the USS Hornet still breathes. Visitors walking her corridors often speak of a strange sense of presence, as if the past lingers just beyond hearing. On the flight deck, the wind seems to carry the distant echo of engines roaring to life. Every corner whispers a single message: we were here. And that is why the Hornet's story still matters, because it is not only the story of a ship, but of the courage, sacrifice, and humanity etched into its steel. In October 1944, the Hornet participated in the largest naval battle of World War II, Leyte Gulf. It was a chaotic, sprawling conflict across the Philippines that effectively destroyed Japan's ability to wage large-scale naval war. Hornet pilots attacked Japanese ships, airfields, and supply lines. They contributed to sinking cruisers, damaging battleships, and stopping reinforcements that might have turned the tide. By 1945, the Hornet was a veteran of countless missions. But the battle for Okinawa would test the crew like nothing before. Japan unleashed waves of kamikaze attacks, suicide pilots determined to smash themselves into Allied warships. The Hornet, like every carrier, was a prime target. Anti-aircraft guns thundered day and night as the crew fought off repeated assaults. The ship survived, scarred but standing, her flight deck stained with smoke, salt, and the memory of close calls. When the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and Japan finally agreed to surrender, sailors aboard the Hornet received the news with a mix of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. For many of them, it marked the end of months, sometimes years of combat at sea. But their work was not finished. In the months after the Japanese surrender, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Magic Carpet, a massive effort to bring home millions of American servicemen. The Hornet became one of the ships assigned to ferry veterans back to the United States. Her massive hangar deck, once filled with aircraft and ammunition, was now packed with bunks, duffel bags, and weary young men who had survived jungles, storms, and battles halfway around the world. For many, stepping onto the Hornet meant stepping onto the path back to their families. She carried them across the Pacific, back to California, back to peace, back to life. It was a fitting mission for a ship that had taken so many into danger, and now had the honor of bringing them home alive.